you are still rocking it out on Smash 64. With me, I am joined by friends and also important voices in the Smash community, everyone doing something different and special in their own way. So I will let them introduce themselves, starting with a good friend of mine from Texas named Robert.
Hello, everybody. You probably know me better as Wobbles. I write about competition. I've got my own little blog. I used to play a bunch. I've been playing Smash 4 a lot, and I just like talking about the game in general. So that's pretty much that pretty much is what I'm about.
Thank you. Notable also for your second place finish at EVO 2013. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was
John, you're up next.
Hey everybody, my name is Infinity and I'm awesome. I don't have a whole lot of tournament record stuff behind me like my predecessor did, but I'm one of the figureheads down here in the southern part of the U.S. for Smash, and I'm here to chime in and let everybody know what I think about this 2-stock versus 3-stock discussion.
Cool, thank you. And following up Sean, we have Billy.
Yo, how's it going? I'm Bwett. I started up Tiny Locator. I essentially do this stuff with Oracle and Infinity, and we try to present as much content to y'all as possible.
Thank you very much. And next we have Max.
What's up, guys? I'm Max Ketchum, also known as juiceDoom. I'm kind of a mixture of things. I compete, but I also commentate and run tournaments at Hitbox Arena up in New Jersey, bouncing between New Jersey and New York all the time, trying to bring more exposure to the Smash community, get a whole bunch of new people to join.
Cool. And Pierce, you're next.
All right. My name's Dan, but as you guys know, most of you guys call me Pierce. I'm most notable for my contributions to collecting information regarding the Smash games and casting major tournaments, such as Apex. And I try and do as much casting as possible, big events like SK-Tar, and a couple of local events as well. And I mainly like to just teach people about Smash and bring communities together.
Oh,
cool. Sounds good. Thanks very much. And finally, our second Daniel. That's why I call him Pierce. Piers. Daniel's in the
room. So I'm Daniel, aka Tafokints. You may know me for writing blogs and my awful puns on commentary. I aim to just help out the community with just informing people of issues and making sure that tournaments are streamlined logistically, because I believe that it can make or break a player or a newcomer's experience.
Cool. So we will jump right into the 2 versus 3 stock discussion, and I'll give you guys a little bit of heads up on how this is going to go. So this whole production is part of Project Smash, and Project Smash is an effort that I started in order to basically organize a lot of the activity going on in the Smash community. We've grown to a huge size, and we stand a really good chance of growing even bigger. But with these numbers come a lot of problems. We have our numbers are spread all around the globe, and we have tournaments going everywhere, but that just makes communication that much harder. We have everyone doing different things, and I figure sitting down and making a concerted effort to get everybody on the same page will do us a lot of good. So one of the first things I did was create a Smash survey in which I polled anybody who plays Smash. Whether you think you're casual or the best player in the world, I wanted to get your feedback in order to know how to best proceed in this endeavor. So the website that kind of hosts all of this information is smash.menu. You may have to put a www in front of that. But smash.menu has, right on the forefront, the survey that focuses and asks each individual Smasher what they think about the game, how they got into the community, what they value in the community. And these are all very important questions that I think is going to shine a lot of light on where we're going to go next and how things have gone up until this point. So at the very top of the Project Smash website, there is a link on the left side that will take us to the 2 versus 3 stock issue. And among many things that I hope Project Smash will do in the near future, this is the primary way I would like to organize issues. And it has a very simple format. One, when issues come up, we start with a page like this, and you'll get a little bit of background on the issue, and it'll just introduce everybody to the topic at hand. In this case, the 2 versus 3 stock. the basic idea is Smash has always been a game that gives us lots of options when we create matches. Even back to Smash 64, I remember playing with different item combinations, teams versus not teams, free-for-all, everything. So just from the get-go, we have a lot of choices we can make in terms of how we want to play Smash. And there's not just one style of Smash for casuals and one style of Smash for competitive players. There's a huge variety, and the rules tend to change over time. So deciding on what rules we want to go with as a community is no small feat, and it's connected to a lot of other issues. And the second thing I think that's important when framing issues for the future of the Smash community is being aware that there are a lot of voices out there. Some of these voices are contained in Twitter or your sub-communities. Sometimes they're contained within tournament hosts and the tournaments that they run on a regular basis. We have streams and a lot of popular players, but that just means there's a whole lot of voices out there, and this is an effort to organize some of the best voices that rise to the top. So as you scroll down the page, on the left side we have the 2-stock Pro, and the right side we have Pro 3-stock. And as you can see, some people in this very meeting are represented in this display here, like Clash Tournaments and Pierce talking on the left about the pros of 2-stock, and on the right the tourney locator stream conversation with Bwett and Infinity talking about the pros of 3-stock. So over time, these topics and issues will be gathered. I think everyone has a voice and they should contribute to this issue, and there's many ways to do that. And after a set period of time, as you can see at the top, these issues are to come to a close. And as we close them, I think this is one of the best ways to do it. Get some of the leading voices to join each other in a conversation, go over the evidence, go over many things of what other members in the community have said, and to just have a good old conversation about it. I think that'll do our community well, and we're going to try the first attempt right now.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you very much for bringing us all here together. 2-stock versus 3-stock is an issue that I've been talking about since the days of Brawl, because I've commonly said that even back when Brawl was being played very, very competitively everywhere, as large as Smash 4 is now, that I think 2-stock should have been the standard. And I have a bunch of different reasons. I'll just start off with some of the biggest ones that we can address some of the heavy-hitting arguments right off the bat. It's just that a 2-stock match is a faster match, and from an organizational perspective, we can get tournaments to run quicker and smoother. We don't have to have tournaments that run into midnight. I've seen many, many, many major tournaments that ran overtime. I'm talking about Apex. I'm talking about SK Tar. Actually, I can't actually quote an SK Tar that ran overtime, but just at many huge events, at national level events, international level events even, we've had tournaments simply run way beyond the buzzer when we were building, etc., and that's completely unacceptable. It tells me that our game time is too long. Something that somebody said to me actually really stuck home and true. They said most games, what they do is they set the timer for how long should a game be. And then after they set the timer, then they determine how much health they're going to assign each character so that it fits within the budget of how much time they're going to have. In Smash, for some reason, we chose not to do it that way. We picked an amount of health we want the characters to have, and then from there, we said, okay, now here's how much time we think it'll take for characters to, actually lose this amount of health. Or here's an acceptable range of time to give the characters time to compete with this amount of health. And I think that's a really weird way to go about it, because now we actually have very long matches. It's true that not every match runs to 8 minutes, or in the case of Smash 4, 6 minutes, depending on what timer you have. But why would you... Everybody agrees. I haven't found a single person who says, yes, I really love it when matches continuously go to 8 minutes. If that's what you want to avoid, why do you make it possible for a match to go to 8 minutes in your rules? That just makes no sense. If you want matches to never go to 8 minutes, then why do you have an 8-minute timer? To me, that just makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and strongly second what Pierce said about fitting the game time and the health with the game time going first. I believe it was actually Goggles who brought that up, so props to Goggles, because I definitely read it first from him, and that really resonated with me as well. 8 minutes is simply just way too long for a game timer. I feel like 5 to 6 is much, much healthier, and there's enough time for 2 stocks to pass without it going dangerously close to time or anything. But straying from the organizational perspective, I think as a viewer, man, it is simply too difficult to sit through 8 minutes of gameplay, or like the average 3-stock match is just kind of really difficult to watch. Most people have an attention span of about 5 minutes or less when they're sitting and watching something on their computer. And to break so far from that, to give like the average game time in 3 stocks, maybe like 5 or 6 minutes, like that's just tough to watch. You wanna see something go a little faster, and the pace of the game feels, first of all, excellent in 2 stock. For Glory and many tournaments in the Northeast have been 2 stocks, and I feel like it's a very appropriate pace for the game. And also, people say things about adaptation, which I know is definitely about to be the next thing to come up. Adaptation and comebacks. They say you don't have ample time to make a comeback or to adapt to your opponent's playstyle in 2 stocks. And to that I say, yes, you certainly do. You can make a comeback even in 1 stock. There are percent leads, and I'm sure many people who are watching this, if you are familiar with Brawl, I was a very large proponent of 1 stock in Brawl, and certainly 2 over 3. So I definitely am very, very pro 2 stock. I think it fits the game excellently in terms of viewership pacing, playing pacing, and tournament organization.
They alleged that ones that were close to the former leader, Jung Min, wanted to crack down in Hong Kong.
Someone, I think that Pierce, you have something going on, broski.
Okay, cool. So,
he was warning us that if his mic blew up for any reason, it was probably going to be World Series related.
Yeah, that was all on that one.
So already in the discussion, we have a couple of pretty big topics to sort of tease out and figure out for ourselves. Tournament organizing is complicated, and I'm glad that we have a couple of actual tournament hosts in this conversation so they can give us what their thoughts are on the issue. Tournament organizing, adaptation, and what makes a satisfying match to both watch and play. And I think one thing right off the bat that we noticed based on the comments is that it could be different for spectators and players. I think players, as players, we got used to having a lot of Smash stamina. We can go to an event early in the day and Smash till past midnight, and that's just something we've sort of built up over time and developed. And you can definitely tell new Smashers don't have as much stamina as some of us veterans because they're not used to being at a tournament when it's a energetic and draining environment all day. But for spectators, that's quite a different story. Depending on whether or not they're relaxing at home or how they're watching the event, they have a very different experience watching Smash versus the player engaged actually playing it or the people at the event. So if anybody on the pro 3 stock side of things would like to comment on tournament organizing, adaptation, or what makes a satisfying match, jump in now.
Actually, I'd like to jump in on the 3 stock part. I've been kind of a proponent of the 3 stock rule set up to this point. Part of the reason that I think that I started with 3 stock is because I have a strong Brawl background. That's where I very first started with competitive Smash Brothers. But whenever I was playing, I was looking at it from the point of view as a player, not the point of view as a tournament organizer or somebody viewing, or as a holistic point of view of the community and as a whole. And as time goes on, and as I have gotten more and more experience with Smash 4, I'm kind of caught in between making a decision between 3 stock and 2 stock. The things that Pierce and Max were mentioning a moment ago are both very strong cases. 1, 3 stock takes a long time for tournament organizers to go through and actually run things efficiently, and 2, it's a really big deal to push everything through for like end viewers, like Richard was saying. And so what I'm looking at is I'm starting to really wish we had like a 2.5 stock option or something like that, because that feels just right. It feels like it's something in between 2 and 3 stock.
Let me ask you a question.
What's up?
You said you're a proponent of 3 stock, and it's because you come from a Brawl background. I guess I predate Brawl slightly. I did enter Melee, but the big stride in my Smash career came during Brawl. That being said, do you feel like your main draw to 3 stock is just because it's what's familiar and what's comfortable, or do you find some other advantage as a Brawl player to why you feel 3 stock is comfortable that can be a little bit more clearly defined than just its familiarity?
Okay, what I've done since then, since this game came out, is I've actually sat down and tried to logically analyze what's going on with it and why we're making the decisions we're making. And so you're posing a good question. I've asked myself that question. Am I doing this just because it's a knee-jerk reaction, what I'm used to, what I'm comfortable with? Or can I step outside of my comfort zone and recognize that something may be better for the health of the game? And so what I did is I made kind of a mental list of some pros and cons of 2-stock over 3-stock, and I made some lists of pros and cons of 3-stock versus 2-stock. One of the things that I really like about 3-stock is it does give the players more time to adapt to one another. It's true that players can adapt to one another in a 2-stock environment or even in a 1-stock environment. That's 100% true. But it gives them more time to do so when you play in 3-stock. And I have personally, just this last weekend, we played in a 3-stock event on the southwest portion of the Dallas Metroplex where they used the 3-stock rule set, and there were several games where I lost 2 stocks and then won the game in both winners and grand finals. And so the 3-stock rule set ultimately ended up benefiting me, and I won because of that, because I had the extra time to adapt to my opponent and realize what he was doing to pressure me out. So coming from a player perspective, I think it's better for the players to have 3-stock, but we have more to consider than just the players here. We have the community as the viewers, the end users who are watching live streams or videos on YouTube. We have the people who are at the event that may be waiting on matches or are in between or are even watching there in person. It's all going to feel different based on where you are. 8 minutes in Smash doesn't feel like 8 minutes, even though it sometimes plays out to the full 8-minute mark. Because when you're sitting there playing the game, it feels so much faster than that. It feels like it's so much more intense because there's so much going on. But I feel like from a player perspective, 3-stock is the option. But from a viewer perspective and from likely a community perspective overall and from a tournament organizing perspective, 2-stock is mostly the way to go. I've been kind of dominating the conversation here for a minute or two, so if somebody wants to chime in, by all means, guys.
Just in response to that, I want to say that I feel like the speed of adaptation is also a worthwhile skill to test. You know, I'm sure like certain players might catch on around the 3 or 4 or 5-stock match mark in the match if you were playing, say, like a 10-stock match or something, and then they'll end up carrying the win from there. But it's definitely a skill worth testing to see how quickly you can adapt to your opponent's strategy. And also, if you're on the other side of things, if you're playing kind of a nutty, randomy style, you know, you want to have one that's effective enough that'll last 4 of your opponent's stocks, you know, 2 per game to win 2 out of 3. So I definitely think speed of adaptation is a big factor that plays in. If you're truly the more skilled player, 2 stocks is definitely enough for you to overcome that.
Right.
Yeah, Oh, go ahead, please.
I was going to say one of the things to note is just from a tournament organizing perspective and from a community leader perspective, we have to find that sweet spot where the adaptation is just right for the players in order for us to properly test that skill in a tournament environment. So going to a 4-stock or a 5-stock perspective is very likely way too much for us to reasonably give people that much amount of time to adapt to their opponents. So we have to determine what that sweet spot is.
Yeah, I feel like 2-stock is pretty much that sweet spot.
And that's what I basically wanted to follow up, is what you said and what Max said is what I agree with. You have to find the sweet spot. And I actually don't believe that 3-stock is a sweet spot. I think 3-stock could be considered, quote-unquote, too much time to adapt. Because I look at it from this perspective. If we were to theoretically have started playing Brawl with 2 stocks, right, and then all of a sudden somebody was like, hey, let's jump up to 3 stocks, right? Then from this perspective, everybody would say, wait, why would we do that? And they would list a whole lot of negative reasons why it wouldn't be good to jump to 3-stock. Pretty much the pros from going from 3-stock to 2-stock would be cons for going from 2-stock to 3-stock if 2-stock was already the status quo. But on top of that, it would be like a slippery slope kind of argument. How many stocks should we add to allow the players to have more time to adapt? And adaptation is a great skill. It's a skill I definitely want to test when playing Smash. But it's not I wouldn't consider it the only skill or the most important skill. I would say it's an important skill, but not the most important skill. I wouldn't say any one skill is the most important skill, but I want to be careful of assigning 3-stock as giving more time for adaptation because I don't want to emphasize that skill over any of the other skills. And I think, one, your ability to adapt in a 2-stock match, there's plenty of time in 2 stocks. One thing I really like about Smash 4 is that the neutral game is very it's very open-ended, but unlike in Brawl, barring like Meta Knight Dittos and stuff like that, unlike in Brawl, there is actually an advantage state and a disadvantage state. You can get rewards off of hits due to the new mechanics of air dodging into the ground is no longer like a cheesy win condition, and you can really gain some advantage when you land a hit. Now, when I take that into consideration, it means that we have a neutral game, which is very important to master, and then we have how good are you in advantage and disadvantage positions. Now, that's true in both Brawl and in Smash 4, and in Melee and all Smash games. But basically, the point I'm trying to get at here is there's not necessarily... The games aren't so short where it's just like neutral game, advantage, dead, game over. There's plenty of time in there to adapt. You're going to go back to the neutral state probably at least 6 times, even at the highest level of play. You're generally not going to kill somebody's stock off of just a single read off your first read in neutral. Right? So from what I'm saying is there's a lot of different points in neutral and a lot of different points for the players to interact, test their skills in different scenarios, different situations, and express what they know about a matchup and express their ability to adapt in the set. And I don't feel like I need to add an additional stock, if I'm coming from a quote-unquote status quo of where 2-stock is the status quo, to test players' ability to adapt. I want to test players' ability. How good are you in neutral from the gate? When you sit down, are you the better player? So
that's kind of part of what I'm going to wrap up on my thought here is that I feel like that sweet spot is somewhere in between 2 and 3 stock, and we as community leaders need to sit down and determine what the best one out of all of our options are. And as time goes on, I'm starting to lean more towards 2 stock because inherently speaking, Smash players like a faster-paced game. That's why Melee and Project Dim have been as successful as they are, because they're faster and more skill testing, because you don't have the same amount of time and ability to adapt like that. So I am increasingly believing that 2-stock is the way to go, but I personally need more time to make that determination.
Right.
I think that one of the other guys wanted to jump in and say something, so I'm going to go ahead and
I'd like to talk about it, and I think my gut instinct was 2-stock, but then I thought about it further, and I think it's one of those things where we have to see what the meta will really be when we have the Wii U and we have a better punishment game, because it could deviate 2 ways. I'll give some FGC examples. So Street Fighter X Tekken always went to timeout, so we could tell that the pacing after a short while was going to be timeout, and it's going to be a slower paced game. But I think people forget that Marvel 3, when it first came out, people didn't have the combos on lock, and so a lot of these games actually stalled to time.
And then they made Marvel 3 out of 5.
Yeah, but now you see these people kill teams in a matter of seconds sometimes, and so we see the games last a lot shorter than they did when the game first came out.
That's a good point. I would like to highlight a lot of the sort of subtopics that were already discussed in that last session. And one thing that became clear is that the rules that we pick have an effect on how we play the game, including promoting certain play styles. At some point, like Pierce was saying, you can create a game where mental stamina and adaptation are king by just making it 50 stock, right? 20, 50 stock, you have people sitting there forever, they'll keep playing and playing, whoever can outlast them sort of mentally and I guess even physically would be the more likely player to win. And like what Sean was saying, we can create faster-paced matches by reducing the amount of stock, and that will make a lot of the plays a lot more significant in terms of this play is going to be that much closer to getting me the win overall, and we can definitely see that. As a community and as tournament hosts specifically, there's a lot of factors we have to look at to determine what is best for us as players, and now the new concerns of spectators and beyond, right? So it was a really good point brought up. and it's connected to a few more issues that are sort of nestled inside of this 2 versus 3 stock. But Max, did you have anything to add to the 2 versus 3 stock issue?
Yeah, actually, I just saw something really interesting in the chat. It's a pretty minor point, but it still does kind of resonate with me, and it's that someone said part of the viewership benefit for 2 stock is that the viewer doesn't have to stay up until 1 or 2 a.m., which is that's very true. I didn't even think about it. I was in that regard. I was just thinking it in terms of individual matches, but just in the same vein that tournament organizers and players in the venue don't want to stay until 1 or 2 a.m. Like, I can't tell you how many carpools I've had, ADHD or X-top player in Brawl, and the tournament runs forever, and then I can't go home until 3 in the morning. That does apply to viewers who are trying to watch the entire tournament on Twitch at once. So I think it's really important to consider, like, all the people that aren't inside that venue or entering the bracket. Like, only a very, very small percentage of people involved with the tournament structure, I guess, or just all the happenings of a tournament are the entrants. You got to keep in mind TOs, spectators, both in person and at home, and just the friends of the people who remain in bracket for really long times. Because I can tell you for sure, it is not fun to have to stay at a tournament all night because you're driving the guy who's in grand finals, and the game is simply too long. And we've already seen this one time before in Brawl where 3 stock was just uncomfortably long, and I think by the end of it a lot of people were with me on that one. Not necessarily 1 stock, but 3 stock is just not digestible. It's not spectator friendly, and spectators are the largest pool from which we can pull new players into the tournament scene. So yes, it is very important that we're satisfying the players, but 1, I don't think 2 stock is unsatisfactory to the players, and 2, we need to appeal to viewers in order to generate more players.
Very true.
Go ahead.
So a lot of y'all have said viewpoints that I already feel. 2 stock feels much better than 3. 3 takes quite some time. I mean, I played Little Max, so I've never actually felt that. I mean, I die like instantly, so it doesn't really matter. But there's really only one factor with 2 stock that I've seen. There are 2 factors, but one of them is just sort of a get better sort of thing. There's the concept of gimmicking out. Gimmicking becomes stronger the less stocks you have, which is a fine tactic. And if you're capable of doing it and your opponent is incapable of preparing for it, then they deserve to lose. The other one, and this is a much more pressing matter, and one that I'll ask you how you feel about and how you would fix, is the concept of SDing.
I say get better to that as well.
So
better. I'm not creating a rule set to cater to SDs, not at all.
So I mean, we all agree that SDing, becoming consistent, is really important. However, at the same time, it's much greater to SD in a 2 stock match than it is to SD in a 4 stock match. I mean, it always happens. It happens with every single player. It happens with Mango, Mewtwo, King, Sethon, whoever you choose. And so that's just something I want to bring about the discussion, and then y'all can say how y'all feel about it.
Okay.
Cool. So before we continue, I want to say that the SDs is something that was brought up by a lot of people who have already contributed to the 2 versus 3 stock discussion through the website. And a lot of people ask me specifically, like, what about SDs? What about SDs? Like, that's a huge deficit to come back from when it's 2 stock versus 3 stock. And this also sort of plays into the topic of adaptation. So Wobbles and Pierce, if you have anything to say on this topic.
Oh, yes.
Alrighty. I'll hop in for the first time. Oh, boy. I've got a bunch of thoughts. They're kind of scattered, so if I ramble, forgive, please.
Take your time, baby.
First, when we're looking at both intensity of the match, that's a huge part of making the spectator and the player feel invested. It's like that each moment is kind of full of possibilities. And someone brought up Marvel earlier, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that any random poke might lead into the old touch of death, followed by the 50-50 on the incoming person, and then they die, which is what makes stuff like Doom tolerable, because you're watching Chris G time somebody out over and over again on the grand stage, but if Morrigan ever gets touched, there's the possibility that it's all going to end, and that kind of keeps everybody breathless. I think when you have 2 stock, you increase the weight of every mistake, particularly SDs and off-the-stage KOs, stage spikes, things like that. So both for viewers and for players, it does, I think, help to get them more intensely invested in the game. So that's one element to it. Players are always going to be invested in the game. It's really hard to bore a player away from the game as long as they find the core gameplay entertaining. Because like Brawl players don't get bored of playing their game until they get bored of like the core gameplay. But they'll time each other out and not realize the timer's going down.
No, we don't time each other out that much. Just an aside.
I mean, I'm saying it's happened to me. I've not even like intentionally time each other out, but just poke, fade away in neutral, both run up, shield, roll away.
Right.
You don't live in Texas. Texas is the
I've done
king.
that dance.
I do have.
That doesn't happen in Jersey. I'm sorry.
I do have one sentence to respond to Wobbles with, and on the intensity front, it's definitely like it is key that one mistake actually means something. Like it's so important that you can't mess up and like just be able to be forgiven. Like if you look at any other game, like if you look at Street Fighter, yeah, like you mess up one time, you get poked, and like that poke turns into 30%. Or in Marvel, yeah, it's a touch of death. So I mean, you can't just have like a really forgiving environment. That's not exciting.
Well, and so whenever you're talking about like Street Fighter or MVC, you traditionally have, I would say, somewhere between 3 and 4 mistakes that you can make, and then you end up losing a game, right? Because with MVC, you have a mistake, you'll lose character. If you make a really big mistake, then you'll lose, more than one character. But with like Street Fighter, it's probably about 3 mistakes, maybe 4 mistakes, depending on whether or not they have meter. And so the question is, and another thing is just our mistakes in Smash. It's a very different kind of thing, just because whenever you make a mistake in fighters, it is up to the skill of your opponent to be able to punish you and do that damage. Whereas in Smash, it can not be up to the opponent at all. You can just lose half of your life bar, right? Just from your mistake, by no admission to your opponent whatsoever.
Okay.
Can I add something?
I had another thing about adaptation. I'm waving my hand like you guys can see me.
I think Max is about to leave, so we're going to give him a proper.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Wobbles. You have not had much voice time, so I feel kind of bad cutting you
Well,
off.
if you're about to leave, go for it. I don't mind.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do have to cut it short, but the last thing I want to say is that the timer is a win condition that a lot of Smash players are just kind of afraid of, and I feel like that stems very heavily from Melee and Brawl both having like the wrong time limit. Like Melee having an 8-minute timer, Jesus, like you don't want to watch 8 minutes of gameplay, especially when it's usually degenerative camping, like Hungrybox versus Armada, for example.
When stuff goes to 8 minutes in Melee, stuff gets banned.
Yeah, like you don't want to watch 8 minutes of gameplay, but like in other games like Marvel and Street Fighter, you have a 99-second timer, and a timeout is a lot less of a pain to deal with and watch when the actual time limit that you're watching or that the game is set to isn't painfully long. That's why I also really liked one stock 3-minute Brawl. Like, yeah, you can run. People are like, oh, you could just run away for 3 minutes. Yeah, sure, but at least you're only watching 3 minutes of people running away as opposed to 8. So, yeah, that's like my last real talking point is that the timer is a legit win condition in many, many games. By the way, like Smash is
absolutely
pretty much
almost in every competitive sport.
Yes,
in almost every competitive sport, the timer is the end game condition. Basketball ends when the clock runs out. Soccer ends when the clock runs out. Okay, tennis ends when the number of sets are over. So it's like a rare exception. Golf, hockey, not golf. Golf is considered to be one of the most boring sports. I'll put that out there. Hockey ends when the timer runs out. Football, American football, ends when the timer runs out. These are all games, competitive games based on timer. The reason we have timers is because the game needs to come to a conclusion, but most sports have figured out ways to incorporate timers so that the game can come to a conclusion not only in a timely fashion, but also to enhance the gameplay by adding pressure onto the combatants. And the Smash clock has completely failed to do that. Please go ahead, Wobbles, because I know you've been waiting to speak.
All right. Well,
Wait, Max,
Max,
drop your Twitter and then we'll
yeah. I'm just gonna sign off, and yeah, final remark is that the Smash community is by far the most phobic of timeout wins out of any gaming community I've ever seen. So, like, that's something that we're kind of an exception to, and if we find the right timer, it's not so painful. But yeah, guys, you can follow me on Twitter at juiceDoom. I'll be tweeting about Smash-related things and cats and everything. So thank you for having me, KirbyKid, and everybody. It's been good talking. You guys are all doing a wonderful thing for the Smash community, and yeah, let's keep it up, and let's keep open floor discussions like this going so we could make the right decisions for the community and stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So, thanks, man.
Thanks.
Yep. See you guys. Sorry, Wobbles. You can finally talk.
Okay, you're good.
I'd like to interrupt. So a lot of people think of SDs as the biggest, like, in terms of like.
Hold on, Daniel. Daniel, I think Wobbles needs to finish his thought, and then you are next, right after him.
Okay, sorry.
Alrighty, so on the subject of timeouts, a big problem with timeouts in this particular format of game is that they feel significantly more inevitable when the camping strategy is executed properly. Because it's a maneuvering-based game, if you successfully execute a timeout strategy, it actually turns into degenerate gameplay that you couldn't have done anything about, or at the very least, it really, really looks like it. Second, as mentioned before, the timer is set super long to discourage it, to encourage people to fight, and I think that's because the gameplay can kind of be conducive to that kind of running away. But I don't know, I kind of like having a shorter timer and encouraging people to fight, and if the match does run to timeout and it gets settled by percent, it's like having it settled by a life bar in another game. But what I really started on was adaptation is what I really wanted to talk about as an issue, and this is something I think we didn't mention yet, but I kind of like the idea of, is that we can, if we start on 2 stock, and we want to increase the importance of adaptation in, the higher profile matches, we can switch to 3 out of 5 earlier in the bracket as a different way to encourage that adaptation over the course of a set. Because if you have 2 out of 3 with a 5-minute timer, say you're using For Glory or whatever, then that's potentially 15 minutes of gameplay running to timeout. And then if you switch to 3 out of 5, it's potentially 25 minutes. But then 2 out of 3 with an 8-minute time limit is potentially 24. Or if it's a 7-minute time limit, it's potentially 21. So they're kind of close in number. But if you wait until later in the bracket, you reduce like the possible mathematical impact of that over the course of the whole thing. You could encourage more adaptation. And then the last thing I want to say about keeping 2 stock is that For Glory is 2 stock. And a lot of people are going to be getting into this game because they played online in For Glory. And I think if that shapes how they play and perceive the game, and it eases their transition, and we find the gameplay not to terribly change one way or the other, depending on which stock count we use, then we might as well make it worth it for them to want to keep playing the way they're comfortable.
I
couldn't agree more.
That a lot. So one thing to kind of stress, and a lot of people don't really like the idea of stressing this, but I do, is the concept of catering not only to the players but to the viewers. Some people will say, oh, why are you catering to the viewers? They aren't the ones playing the game, but they're the ones supporting the game, and they're the ones that are your potential audience. They're the ones that will potentially be entering your tournament from then on. And I think that's a great point that Wobbles made, of just trying to lower the barrier of entry as much as possible in all aspects and all facets of the game is extremely important for the progress and the progression of the game.
Cool. Daniel, you have the floor next.
With Pierce or me?
No, go ahead. Talk.
So I want to bring up a previous point about like SDs, and I think we always talk about what we lose, but like if you have a guaranteed kill and you mess that up, it's like giving away a stock in a different way. There's countless little things that will make or break it, and I think that's a really weak argument. And the other point I had was going off of Wobbles. Just viewership is highly underrated, and it's what gets us into larger events and allows us to stay there. If Smash 4 gets into Evo and it gets like, I don't know, 80,000 and then it drops the whole way, then it might not be back next year. And so it's really important for the sustainability of the game's health. And I want people to be able to fly out to large events. I want sponsorships for the top players, and viewership matters in that regard.
Plus, if you can find something amenable to both the viewers and the players, then, that's a sweet spot that you want to be hitting. Like I said before, I think people will honestly, they'll play almost anything, and they'll adapt to almost anything, but they aren't really going to want to change the convention once it's set in stone long enough, because it's going to suddenly, just out of nowhere, feel, quote, end quote, wrong to them. But if you're doing 2 stock and then you do like 3 out of 5 maybe, or you just, you stick with 2 out of 3 until semis or whatever, they're going to get used to it, and they're going to change the way they play, and then it's going to become convention and whatever. And if it gets more people into it and the players are happy, I see absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Cool. We have Pierce and then Sean up on deck.
Yeah, all right. So one thing I've heard a lot is, we're catering to the viewers, not the players, because growth of the game altogether. I don't necessarily see 2 stock as taking away from the players. I mean, right now I mainly play 2 stock. I've been advocating 2 stock for a long time, and I enjoy playing 2 stock a lot. In all sense of the game, I don't feel like something's been taken away from me when the game is 2 stocks long. I don't feel like I'm now playing a worse game from a player perspective because it's 2 stocks long. In no way do I feel that way. I feel perfectly fine. I feel like it's pretty much the same game. Could the game have gone a different way if there was another stock? Yes, but studies were done. A lot of data was actually collected the year that Brawl was in MLG, and we found that the vast majority of games, if you've taken the first 2 stocks, you're going to take the last stock. I know earlier, Sean brought up a personal testimony about how he lost the first 2 stocks and came back to win the game. That's fine. That's cool, and glad for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean I would want to shift my rule set to cater to that possibility.
Yeah, why didn't you just 3 stock him from the start?
Right. From a player perspective, maybe it's cool for you that you came back, but maybe it's frustrating for the other person that they lost all that momentum. At the same, it goes either way when you're talking about a 1 0. And at the end of the day, I don't feel like I've lost anything because of 2 stocks. And from a player's perspective, it also creates more exciting, intense moments. Because let me give you an example this way. Fighting games are actually a little bit unique because you're fighting a battle over a long stretch of time, and you're trying to deplete your opponent's health bar. Some games are much more rapid-fire scoring than in fighting games. For example, when you're in most major sports, all right, you score by scoring a goal. Some of them take really long; they're hard to score a goal. Like soccer is a low-scoring game versus basketball, which is a high-scoring game, versus like American football, which is a little bit mid-range. All right, and I guess fighting games would be kind of like the mid-range game of video games, versus you have your MOBAs where you got to destroy towers and bases and stuff like that, and those are like the very low-scoring games, or some people would count the kills. And then you have your shooters, which are the high-scoring games, where it's like, okay, you shoot somebody, you get a kill. And fighting games are in the middle of that, and I think 2 stock is a lot more comfortable because what you don't want to see in any game is where you have two teams against each other, like one side versus another side, and it takes an impossibly long amount of offense to finally score against the opponent. That is, soccer, for being the most popular sport in the entire world, that's the number one complaint that all people who don't like soccer have against it, is that it's a very low-scoring game. People like high-scoring games. People like when actions have a significant impact. I want to go back to before when we were discussing gimmick strategies. Gimmick is not a word I like to use. If you have a strategy, it's good. And if it's not a good strategy, then it's going to get exposed. But I don't really like to call it a gimmick strategy because what I like to do is I like to call it a high-risk versus reward strategy. All right, there's moves in the game that are designed to be high-risk versus reward. And suppose you take a move like Donkey Kong's F-Smash in the game, right? In a 2-stock game, Donkey Kong's F-Smash has a bigger impact because it can remove your stock, and so basically it does a greater percentage of your health. All right, if you die and you only have 2 stocks, a move that deals a large percentage of your health, obviously it feels more powerful, but at the same time, when you get punished, the punish is, like, if you don't successfully land it, the punish that you get is more rewarding for the opponent because you have less health. So you're taking a higher risk and you're getting out a higher reward, and extending that end of the spectrum so that these types of moves are extremely high risk, extremely high reward, creates for more exciting gameplay, not only from a viewer perspective, but also from a player perspective. Right? Because in your mind, in a 3-stock match, if you land that Donkey Kong F smash, you're like, okay, well, that was almost a medium risk for medium reward, right? Because, okay, you removed 33% of their health when you took out that stock, and then if they miss, then, you still have a lot of life left to work with. And the problem is, when you extend the game to be longer, you don't make the moves more powerful to compensate, so all you do is lower the aspect of that extremity that you can have in the game. Eventually, the more health that the characters have, the less you can take high risks or high rewards, because everything becomes less risky and less rewarding, and that's not really something you want to encourage from a competitive perspective, from a player perspective, or from a viewer perspective.
It's a really good point, Pierce. I've heard many people talk about the power of gimmick strategies, quote unquote. I don't really like the word either. I mean, obviously, I'm a Kirby main from the Melee days. I made Kirby throughout the entire game, so I invented all of the Kirby side and all the crazy techniques you've probably seen on YouTube, except for like a few which Timmy and Tommy helped me research, but that's way back in the day. So, like, I built my entire game knowing I have a whole book, literally. I printed out a book of strategies that are like, only use this once, only use this at one tournament once, and like it breaks after that. But you can get the win if nobody knows about it. So I kept my secrets close to, like, I kept them in the vault. So I know firsthand on how impactful and how important those kinds of things are. And in the proper sort of setting in terms of tournament roles, those strategies can be really exciting and they can have their time to shine. And the best way to do that is to have sort of less stock, so that if I pull off a move like that, it can win a whole game instead of, oh, he's just going to come back the next 2 stock, and then, it's time, the glory time to shine for that strategy is already over. Like, I'd like for some surprising, risky, almost gimmicky strategies to have a little bit more limelight, and I wish that if they could swing a whole match and be the ender for an entire stock in a 2-stock match, that kind of would help it get that little bit of punctuation it's currently missing.
Just to give a little bit of clarification for the viewers, I would define a gimmick as a strategy that is easily countered, and that traditionally will not work the second that you find that counter, whereas a high-risk, high-reward scenario is just, in general, something that can be very good. You just have to find the correct scenario for it, and you're making a high risk, high reward to achieve it. Whereas a gimmick, the second you understand the gimmick, it no longer becomes relevant. The high risk, high reward is still relevant.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was a really good explanation, Billy.
I think that was a fantastic. The only thing I want to add on to that is, when I'm thinking about making a rule sets for the game, by that excellent definition, I don't even take gimmicks into consideration one way or another, just because I think about competition at a high level of play. A gimmick will affect low level play however it affects it, and I think that has very little to do with the rule set. And at a high level of play, based on the definition that you just gave of gimmicks, which I strongly agree with, high level players are not susceptible to gimmicks because they have a fuller understanding of the game.
Correct.
So we have Sean has the floor next. He's going to kind of shift the topic, but keep in mind, after Sean speaks, we're going to put a little bit of a close on this because we are running a little bit long, and I will define and introduce some of the other topics we didn't get a chance to talk about and outline a little bit more about the Project Smash movement, and we can take the conversation from there. So Sean, you're up.
Okay, I'll try to keep this as short as I can, make it a little bit lengthy, but I thought about it and realized that we're sitting here at a roundtable discussion, and what we've been doing is kind of individually presenting some opinions and kind of some little tidbits here and there, and I'm going to be kind of blunt. A lot of this is things that we've already heard before. We've already heard these cases made. So what I was thinking was instead taking this in a slightly different direction, and I would like to go around the table with everybody. And the first thing I want to ask, I have 2 questions, and I want everybody to take turns. I'll call you out responding to the question. What do you think the top 5 benefits, in very, very short way of saying it, of two-stock are? And I'm going to start with Tafo. Tafo, what do you think the top 5 benefits are for two-stock?
Dang, tournaments don't end at midnight. The viewership gets more exciting. It's a lot more. It's easier to logistically coordinate. We can be more integrated with larger event tournaments like Evo. It's more seamless. Off the top of my head, I could think of 4. I'm pretty sure other people will get in on number 5. So those are my 4.
Okay, well, we can do 4. Pierce, I've got you next, bud.
All right. I'll go with it enables players to take high risks for high rewards. It's more exciting to watch because it creates a greater amount of tension. It's not mentally fatiguing for all parties related to the event, players, commentators, casters, viewers, spectators, hosts, organizers, everybody involved. It's less intensive. Two-stock also is a more familiar game archetype to everybody entering For Glory. I think that's a major, major point. And that it properly encompasses all players' different traits for approaching the game, what strategies they want to use. It doesn't simply enable players who want to come with a read-only strategy to dominate. It enables players who are good at reading to win. It enables players that are good at the neutral to win. It enables players who are good at punishing and following through with their punishers to win.
Okay, so we've got your 5. Wobbles, you're up next, bud.
Alrighty, so first one is I actually kind of like the emphasis that it sort of shifts to the possibility of getting critical hits in the match. In a 3-stock setting, you could get an off-the-stage KO, and then the other person could drag it back out through the force of attrition. But in a 2-stock match, that's actually a bit less likely, especially with the rage mechanic. So I kind of like that it adds a bit more benefit to trying to be aggressive and securing big swings. 2, as mentioned, time limit, and that does have an effect. And if you're finding 3, it offers you flexibility, because if you decide, hey, 2-stock isn't adaptive enough, but we do like the time frame thing, you can switch it to 3 out of 5 different points in the bracket. 0.4, I think. I don't know. I'm bad at counting.
I've got emphasis shifts to critical hits versus attrition. It's faster, and then I've got flexibility, so you're coming up on 0.4.
Okay, 0.4 eases the transition for For Glory players who are going to form a lot of the people who get excited about the game and see tournaments on Twitch and then decide, hey, I kind of want to show up to one of those because I beat all my friends. And then they're going to make some new friends, and that fact won't be true anymore, and that'll be pretty sick. And 0.5, I don't know if I have a 0.5.
4 is good.
I like it.
If you top off at 4, that's good.
0.5 is I like it. And I'm important.
Put that in all
personal opinions. No.
Fact. It is a fact that I like it, and it is a fact
Let them know.
I'm important.
Let them know.
All right,
remove them. Get them out of here.
All right, guys. Up next, I have KirbyKid. What's your opinion on 2-stock? What are the benefits?
Benefits. They give you shorter matches, which I think are great for keeping people, their attention spans locked into the match and very easily tracing the beginning, middle, and end of things. I think it's helpful that it's shorter. Giving more time for TOs to run side events. I know the matches individually will be shorter, and that's great for spectators, but I want teams back, and I want even more sort of experimental and interesting side events. And if there's less stress on TOs, that's a great thing for the community overall. There's a lot that can be done with a few minutes of extra time here and there. Compatibility with For Glory is great. Pierce brought that up a long time ago, and it was brought up here, so I think that's a great idea. I never thought of that. And the last, who doesn't like doing this with their fingers? Yeah.
Okay, so I got to be honest with you. I caught 3 points. Maybe I missed one. To sum up the first part, you like it because it's faster. Mm-hmm. Not just the game itself, but for the tournament organization effort as a whole. In addition to that, the second point I've got is possibility for side events. Yeah. And then the third one I've got is compatibility with For Glory. Which one did I miss?
That was pretty much. I'll have more flexibility to run more rounds in your set, you can see more character changes, more stage changes, and that's going to be great because viewers and just people in general love lots of different things in front of their face. And even though as smashers and competitors we can watch it, first to 20 set from fighting game tournaments, like sometimes they do that. And I think that's great. I watch those for like a 2-hour block straight. Most people can't do that.
All right. Up next, Mr. Bwett.
Y'all said all of it. There's nothing more I can say.
We may have already said all of it, but we would like you to vocalize what you would prefer. So that way, number one, I can write it down. Number two, you can actually voice your opinion.
Cool. All right. Cool. Well, let's do it. Faster. I'm a freaking TO, so like anything that makes my life easier is awesome. So that's number two. Number three is it's more intense, which makes for a greater watch for the viewers because Tourney Locator's content provider, and we want to provide something that's really entertaining. So that's number three, and then number four, lowering the barrier of entry for those that are not in the scene, getting into the scene. Putting it at 2-stock is a wise decision for that.
Okay, so we have 4 out of 5. Are you stopping at 4?
Oh hell yeah! I'm not doing it. It's number 5 would be that I'm Little Mac. If I kill you first, then I get a KO punch and then I win the game. So that's pretty cool.
I like that.
I am a fellow Mac player, and I approve of this message.
So I'm gonna wrap that one up, and I'm gonna go ahead and voice my opinion on this one. Number one, first and foremost, out of all of them, it's faster, and that's what we've all mentioned that it's faster paced, not only for the game itself, but for the event as a whole, and for the end viewers. So I feel like it's overall better because it's faster. Number two, it's so much easier to organize 2-stock than 3-stock. Just coming from an experience perspective, I can tell you that it's easier to organize an event that is paced for 2-stock rather than 3-stock. Number three, it's so much more intense to watch somebody trying to hold on to the last little threads of their life so that they don't lose that second stock than it is in 3-stock. For some reason, 2-stock makes play that much harder. Number four, then this is another popular one, is integration with the For Glory mode is really important, and that lowers the barrier of entry for everybody to want to come into the event, and it's something that people are just kind of used to playing. And then the last one that I have, that nobody mentioned this one, it kind of caught me off guard. When you think about it, 2-stock was put in and implemented by Nintendo, so in theory, 2-stock is directly supported by Nintendo, because they're the ones that designed the game and have put 2-stock in as the default mode for competitive play. So why would we support something that Nintendo is not directly supporting when we know exactly what they are directly supporting?
That's the perfect segue for what the remaining topics in this 2 versus 3-stock issue, some that we touched on lightly and some not at all, are where to start as a community, 2 versus 3-stock. There's a lot of people that express that if you start on one, it'll make it harder for the community as a whole to transition to the other. And I think a lot of those comments were based on the experience of being in the Smash community and just understanding how hard it was to have change happen overall, how hard it is to communicate because we've grown so much, that is very much a real sort of a real problem, an issue that we face as a community as far as communication goes. But I think that fear of starting on one versus the other just because we're resistant to change is something that will be remedied in the near future with efforts like Project Smash, is trying to get more people to talk and post what they know and just organize information. And like what Sean said, another issue that came up is the importance of default settings. I think a lot of people out there's a lot of reasons why I believe they think this, but they read into default settings as being sort of the way to go and the way to play the game. And I know specifically that Sakurai is the designer that wants players to find their own way to play. Doesn't matter how crazy or goofy or competitive or serious or limited the mode is. If you find the mode you like, he gives you as many options as almost you can think of in order to make that happen. So while the game has to have a default setting, and for much of Smash it's time, we don't play by time because we have our own way of doing things. A lot of people look at what's default and they say, okay, well that must be the only way I can play, and that's basically the opposite of what's true. So, getting out of the shadow of games like Street Fighter and getting out of the shadow of the way other games are designed, the default mode it's just a starting point, right? And it's up to every player to carve out their own way to play. And the last topic that we didn't touch on is it too early to tell whether or not we should be playing 2 versus 3 stock? That's a question that came up, I guess, a few months ago when I really started pulling this information together. But now certainly we have a lot more tournaments. And one thing that I think Daniel, Tafokints, and a few others here have mentioned is we can take data on all this. And data is a really important thing to both take and analyze in order to determine how far we're going to go and where we go as a community. So I'm going to show you guys my screen real quick and show you the bottom part of the Project Smash 2 versus 3 stock issue website. So if you scroll down past the conversation, right, past the summary section, you'll see this little survey. And everybody watching this, you feel free to take this as we are wrapping up this 2 versus 3 stock issue. But the conversation is not over, but I think this was a really strong end cap to just really lay out a lot of things that we were thinking. But our voices aren't the only important voices. I think everybody in the Smash community has a voice, and it's important to understand what your opinions are and voice your opinions in a way that's most constructive for all of us. So this is why each one of these issue pages there will be a survey, and it asks a few generic questions at the top, but then it gets to this more detailed section at the bottom, where if you're a player, this question specifically pertains to you. If you're a competitor, you should talk about what it's like to be a competitor. If you're a spectator, you have your own set of opinions, and your information will be organized as such. And if you're a tournament organizer, you have your own section for questions. And I think assuming that all of us Smashers are just one type of person is really the wrong way of going about it. But we all have different interests, and sometimes whether we're a spectator or a player or a competitor or whatever, some of those interests don't align, like we were talking earlier. Spectators have a different view of what's interesting versus players. Go ahead, Pierce.
No, but continue first, and then when you're done, then I'll have something to say.
So I think it's very important that everyone contributes to this discussion if it's important to you. And it's also interesting that for issue pages like this, all the results from the survey, all the feedback is going to be public. So whether or not you join in on the Project Smash conversations or you want to take the data and go to your own community and talk to them about it or discuss it further, all this information is public. I'll show you a little bit what it looks like. We have 99 respondents so far. We could have a lot more. I think there's a lot more interesting things to say and a lot more voices. But the data is really interesting when you sit down and look at it. Like for tournament organizers, a lot of people ran with the 3 stock rule set. But for players, there's a mix between people who have participated in a 2 stock and a 3 stock tournament, right? Here's a question for tournament organizers. A lot of people are not concerned which rule set they use. They picked it and they're going to stick to it. Some people are unsure which is better for their event, and some people are unsure what their attendees would like best. But it's just really cool to get a real honest feedback from all the different types of Smashes out there. And this data is going to go a long way to what we say about Smash and where we move in the future.
Yeah. All right. So you're done. Okay. So first of all, I want to further encourage everybody to just go fill out this survey. It doesn't take long, and it's actually kind of fun to fill out. I filled it out a while ago. And the reason I want to encourage it because maybe you have no real bearing, no real opinion on this 2 stock versus 3 stock thing. Maybe your whole attitude on the whole thing is, who cares? I'm probably still going to play Smash 4 or not play Smash 4, regardless of how many stocks are there, and you don't really care. Even if that's true, fill it out. Fill out the survey, tweet the survey, because big shout-outs to Richard here. What he's doing is actually extremely helpful, not just on this one topic and on this one issue, but it's really healthy and positive for the Smash community altogether because it brings us together, people from different regions. Recently, we've seen people complaining that, one region's voice is too loud, or like one rule set is stifling, etc., etc. But it's really good, and I promote this, and I'm pretty sure everybody in this conversation promotes this, that we collect as much information from as many people as possible because everybody's voice is important. We want to build the best Smash game for all of us together to enjoy. So, thank you for that. Please, please, please go fill it out. It's really fun, really easy, and then share the link. It's so simple. I wanted to touch on a point you mentioned way back at the beginning of this segue, which is when you said picking the rule set that's closest to what Nintendo supports. Now, that is not something I'm going to just go ahead and vocal thing I really care about at all. And the reason why is because maybe I'll care a lot about Nintendo support when they actually communicate with the community. But so far, the way Nintendo has behaved, it's true that they've brought a lot more support to Smash, and for that I am grateful. But I'm not instantly going to start switching my attitude to pandering around to doing what I think Nintendo wants us to do, because Nintendo hasn't been very open in communication with us. So I'm not going to pick rules that are based on what I think Nintendo will want or what Nintendo will support. I'm going to pick rules that I think are best for the community, regardless of what Nintendo wants or Nintendo supports. When Nintendo actually starts communicating with the community, then we can communicate back. And till then, there's nothing I can really do. I'm not going to sit here and guess and say, what would the Nintendo overlords want? If you want us to do something your way, then at least have the decency to at least tell us. But as it is now, they're like lips shut, like Secret Service kind of ninja organization, and I'm not going to sit around here and guess what Nintendo wants us to do. It's no good. So to me, that is like a complete non-factor, what Nintendo wants. Now, again, I still think there's a good argument there for, two-stock being good because it's the Nintendo precedent because of For Glory, but like other than that, I really don't care.
Yeah, I completely agree, Pierce. I think there's a little flip side to it. I think my main priority for Project Smash and everything that we're doing here is to create a better Smash community, and all my energy, all my attention is strictly on you guys, on the players, on the potential players, on the up-and-coming players. So I don't really care what Nintendo's attitude is per se, because as long as we have a game copy and we can play it in our systems sort of independently of them, then all the responsibility falls on us. And I think in the past, Nintendo has had a history of not sort of reaching out to communities like us and sort of getting on the floor with their fans and really hearing what they're saying. But two-sided problem. We haven't been the best at having a unified voice, an organized voice. We're scattered. We're very grassroots, where we exist in sort of different subgroups like regional alliances, and where tournaments are concentrated. That's where you see a lot of activity. So I think if we were stronger as sort of one Smash, as one big voice, even if it's made up of multiple different opinions and voices, that would be a good, strong foot forward to present to Nintendo. But as far as I'm concerned, we don't need them to be the best that we can be. And that's just what I'm looking forward to moving into the future.
Just to toss this out there, when we talk about, what Nintendo wants or whatever, the whole goal of Smash is that you can configure it to play however you want personally. And when you think about the game, the default setting is 2-minute time. And for people who know what vectoring is and avoid any kind of stage spike or any kind of suicide or anything like that, you could conceivably see games where just nobody gets KO'd at all, just one stock, because especially if you fell behind really early at the start, like if you went up to 100% within the first 20 seconds somehow, and the other person's at 10, you might just consider trying to time them out, because the likelihood of you building them up and getting a KO after they KO you and then getting a second one might be really low, so you might actually just time them out. So obviously we don't want to do 2-minute time. Is 3-minute time more fair? But that's not factory standard, and we like stocks anyhow because they feel more resolved. I think like the timer running out just kind of feels like
it settles you for more goal-oriented gameplay.
Yeah, it's
taking a stock is a tangible objective.
Yeah, plus something I kind of
focus on that objective.
Something I like is that when you have stock, if I'm at 100% and you're at 60%, but you're a lightweight and I'm a heavyweight, I might conceivably still consider myself in the lead. With time, especially if we use percentage sort of thing, that kind of turnaround isn't. I don't know how I feel about it, because I guess, yeah, if you run out of timer on a stock game, we do settle it by percent. But it's like with the stock, I don't know, actually. I don't know where I was going with that. It kind of didn't make sense once I reached the end. When you're playing a stock game, though, if you are up like a ton of percent and you get a sudden turnaround hit, then it does feel really satisfying for the game to just kind of explode and end right there. But if you're playing with time and say, you get your sudden turnaround kill and then they still have another 30 seconds to KO you and turn it back to even, like that could feel really dissatisfying. I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought, actually.
It's not a
you
strong resolution.
You were trying to say that in a stock format where health is more clearly defined because you're aiming to remove all the opponent's stocks rather than having the game simply go to time and then it be over, when everyone's health is clearly defined. In a time format, your health is not clearly defined because the game ends when the time is over. In a stock format, the game is supposedly going to end when all the stocks are removed. It gives the game an additional ending condition. In time format, the game only has one ending. In a stock format, the game can end when the time runs up or when all of one player's stocks are removed. When you then enable players' stocks to be completely removed as an end condition for the game, then players have a certain amount of HP, and that matters when talking about the weight difference in characters. Although KOs can be different, the game's not going to necessarily end when one player, quote-unquote, runs out of health. It's simply going to end when the time runs out. But when you have stocks as a factor in the game, all of a sudden, the fact that different characters have different weight classes means that their HP is valued differently because removing that stock off of them works a little bit differently. So therefore, it's more of a factor. I believe that's what you were trying to say.
Yeah, there's another little thing I'm going to interject real quick, and I'll give up my voice forever. Plus the fact that like when the stock ends, the game ends. It feels significantly more explosive. The sudden turnaround can actually have a big emotional impact and get people more invested. And I think that emotional investment in the way the match is going is both important for players and spectators. And if you get the sudden turnaround and then you wait 30 seconds for the timer to run out, then everyone can feel a bit dissatisfied. But when it's like, boom, game's over, everyone can kind of stare in shock like, whoa, wait, what happened just then? Because, it just ends abruptly, and the possibility of that happening is huge for people's kind of investment in the outcome and the intensity of the moment.
I think to put it a bit more succinctly of what both of you are saying is just it creates a stronger narrative. It creates a stronger narrative that links people and makes people more emotionally involved rather than with stock. With time, I mean.
Okay, I think Richard went up soon, but before we get to that point, I definitely had a question that I wanted to throw out there to everybody at the table. I came in here, and everybody knows I'm a huge proponent of two stocks. Like I said, I've been talking about two stocks since 2010. So I've gone into this conversation extremely well rehearsed. What I was surprised is to sit down here today. I know that a lot of people we wanted to have with us here today weren't able to make it, but I was very surprised that, from what I've heard so far, everybody else here seems to be an advocate of two stocks. And to be honest, that's kind of disheartening because while it's great to have a whole bunch of people on your team, it would also be great to have somebody that I could bounce thoughts off of and see the other perspective of things. And I feel like we kind of sort of didn't accomplish that. Is there any actually does prefer three stocks?
I actually, that's what I started off with on everything, is I, at the moment, am caught in between 3 and 2 stock, and I prefer 3 stock. And it's a personal preference, and part of it is because of the Brawl background that I have, and it is just what I naturally enjoy. But I feel like the game... Okay. All right, let me put it as blunt as I possibly can. The game is not as fast-paced as other Smash games are. All right? It is faster-paced than Brawl was, but it's not as fast-paced as, say, Melee or Project M, or even Smash 64. So what that means is that it will not inherently, no matter where we put the game in stock count, go as fast as those other games do, which is what we're kind of going into. We're saying we expect the game to be faster, we expect the game to do this, we expect it to do that. And that's what a lot of us agreed on whenever we were bringing up those points, is that 2 stock is faster. I like 3 stock because, number one, it gives more content to the end user. understand yet why people don't like seeing a game go to time. But one thing I've noticed is I've never once heard anybody say, oh, that game went to 8 minutes. I've heard that game went to time. And even in the two-stock events, I've heard people say, oh, the game went to time. People don't like it when it goes to time, no matter what the time limit is, no matter what the stock count is. It's the phrase, oh, it went to time. It's not the amount of time that it went to. It's kind of a negative stigma.
I don't really want to cut you off. I just have one very brief interjection, and then
You're
I'll
good, dude.
Back. I definitely have heard people, in an 8-minute match, 3 minutes, like let's say it goes to 7 minutes, I've definitely heard exasperated reactions to, oh my god, that game went so long, it went to 7 minutes, etc., etc.
Right.
Even if it didn't hit time, if it took 7 minutes and then finally the stock was taken off, but it like kind of almost went to time, I've still heard people complain about that. So,
you'll hear people say stuff like, there's only like 30 seconds left on the timer in that game and stuff like that. Yeah, I know where you're coming from. It's just, it's an interesting perspective because regardless of what the timer is, people are going to say it with that type of mannerism. Oh, there was only 30 seconds left, or oh, they went down to the last minute, or something along those lines. They won't say it took X amount of times, or when they do, it's fewer and further between than it is when somebody says the game went through time. And so I'm not sure that reducing it to 5 or 6 minutes is going to have that great of an effect. In addition to that, the math and some of the research that I've done is actually in favor of 3-stock, because the 3-stock games, on average, still last just over 4 minutes. And so I'm going, okay, we're using, on average, less, or maybe a hair more than half the time that we've put onto the game itself. What's really wrong with what's going on? Maybe what's going on are people are just tuning in and catching matches that happen to last a long time. Like one of the local players down here, his tag is Aerolink. He is notorious for being an incremental player who takes his time playing. And he, as a result, inherently takes a longer amount of time in an individual game than another player does. And that's without any regard to whether it's 2-stock or 3-stock. The matches are going to inherently last long because of that individual player. And so you've got people that are willing to play this incremental game where they get little itty-bitty advantages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, rather than going from 0 to 60 on somebody. And those are the games that end up lasting a long time in Smash 4. Most of the matches that I see down here in the Southwest region last about 4 minutes and some change, if that. And so I'm going, okay, if we're barely going over the halfway mark on the average game, why are we changing it in order to make it faster when games are maybe 4 minutes? And that's where I'm initially coming from on all this, which is why whenever I very first started on the discussion of everything, I was saying I'm starting to lean more towards 2-stock as time goes on. It's not that I'm in favor of it just yet. I'm still kind of mulling it over in my head, and I'm still moving towards it. I still prefer 3-stock, but as time goes on, I'm leaning more towards 2-stock, and I really wish there was an option that we could pick that was like safely in between 2 and 3.
Something someone pointed out in the chat is that if 2-stock if the matches end up like later on being a minute long because we're brutalizing each other with these wonky combos into meteors that somehow work, then we can go, wow, these games last a minute. We might as well bump it up to 3-stock so it's more satisfying. But it might be tougher to get people to switch to 2-stock later, even if the games are running long, because they won't feel as good. But if you give people more stocks with which to kill each other in a game that's faster paced, then they'll just say, sick, I like it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
That's a good point. I think Daniel has the floor. He hasn't said anything in a little while. We're going to give him a chance.
So I think a lot of people have been complaining about, like, let's make it 3-stock. And I think one factor that comes into this whole time factor is the tournament logistics itself. And I brought this up to KirbyKid a bunch of times that if you have like 100 people Wii U setups, it doesn't matter how many stocks you have. You're not finishing the tournament. And I think as a PSA, I think not only do we have to decide on a rule set, everybody has to contribute to bringing equipment, not delaying the bracket, not getting food breaks to make it run smoothly. And I think the communities that could do that on time and do it well, they have every right to do 3 stocks if they choose to in the early stages, if they can handle the logistics behind it.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I know you were working on an interesting project, Daniel, where you wanted people playing 2 or 3 stock matches online to just sort of log in their data into a website so that we just collect a lot of data. It's a really cool project, and I hope to attach that to the 2 versus 3 stock page on the current Project Smash website. So it's really cool that you're doing that.
Oh yeah, plus we can always get a tournament to run overtime by just increasing the number of matches that we stream on the main setup. So, we can also make it run faster by streaming fewer matches.
Yeah.
But people generally want to see more hype matches than fewer, but, whatever. That's a side note.
I think one monumental leap that we could do in the future as a community is to increase our sort of options and versatility when streaming. And if there's a match coming up with, let's say, Aerolink again, and we kind of know what's going to happen, we could put them on a setup where their match is recorded, and you can do the same thing you see in sports. Like, let's check out what's happening in the Aerolink game, and like it goes over for a little bit. You give people a little taste. You can pop around and show people a variety of what's happening in the tournament, and you're not entirely locked in on there's only one station, there's one set of players, and that's all we can focus on. It may, sports already do that, so it won't be too sort of abnormal, but that'd be an interesting thing to consider. Or even doing sort of like a let's recap what happened on the matches in the corner. You're like, oh, that's cool. And if there are slower matches, you can not show it all. Or show the highlights.
So, whenever I saw that Luck and Aerolink were going to happen at Shockwave, they weren't allowed to play on stream. They just, I was like, no, this isn't happening. Y'all go off. They're like, wait, but please? And it's like, no. And we finished 2 sets on stream before they finished their 1 set.
Oh my goodness. I think it's important to understand.
Glorious for it. Sorry, go ahead.
It's important to understand that with games, with the freedom that we have to both be aggressive, be neutral, be passive, be defensive, that all goes into the same pot when you have just a little bit of freedom to do any one of those things. So while we love our sort of fast-paced, hype matches, at the same time that lets these other kinds of matches in the door, and it's important not to discourage them within our community, right? Like defensive playstyles are really difficult in their own way. There are a lot of people who specialize in them are a very particular kind of person and fighter. So we don't just want to say, no, you have to play like this. We're going to change all the rules to make the game more like this. When embracing that bit of diversity, I think is important.
To join in there, in Melee, a lot of people, say that the game is most exciting when there's like a space animal or a fast faller on the screen. But that's not to say that the only gameplay should involve fast fallers, because the disparity between the different play styles actually creates kind of a narrative where people are maybe rooting for one style over another. It gets people a little more invested. Plus, if you have nonstop fast gameplay all the time, it does normalize after a while. Anybody who is a writer or is an artist of any kind understands the value of contrast in maintaining an emotional impact on people. So if everybody is fast, then everybody is normal. If some are fast and some are slow, then fast stays fast and slow stays slow, and you at least get some kind of mix-up diversity between play styles, and you open up the door for more strategies, which is probably good in the long run.
Cool. Here on my screen, I have some of the current results for the 2 versus 3 stock survey. And as you see, we test both stock options and discuss the issue later, has 61% of the responses. So that's just a strong sort of confirmation that while there are pros and cons for both sides, the community right now is at a place where we are open and we are looking to see actual matches and actual cases in order to before we put any kind of sort of in stamp on this issue. This conversation went really well. I think a lot of good things were said. And thank you guys all for joining. I think we have to wrap this up because we don't want to go too long. We actually expect people to tune in and listen to this later too.
So before we wrap things up, I, on a personal level, can't pass up this opportunity with both Wobbles and Tafo in the chat.
No. Not allowed. Not allowed. Next time.
Y'all don't want to talk about it?
Oh, God.
Yeah, he was saving that one for a while.
Give us your. Are you still closing out?
Just remember, guys, in Google Hangouts, you have the power to mute other speakers.
Whoa!
Oh,
Everyone's getting
okay.
muted.
That
This is going to be
like
Bwett time.
I think, guys, we're wrapping up. It's been great having you all. I was absolutely, really glad to speak with you all tonight. Thank you so much for doing this, Richard. Guys, follow this guy on Twitter. I believe it's at Serving Smash. Here, I'm going to type it in the Twitch chat, and if I spell it wrong, somebody correct me. Of course, follow all these guys on Twitter. They all have amazing things to say. I was really glad to have this discussion tonight. We're going to be keeping up this conversation, just like how Richard just mentioned. There was a 61% that says we want to experiment more, talk with it more. One of the reasons I've been pushing to talk with it so often is because we have Apex coming up right around the corner, and rule sets need to be decided. So we want to collect as much data as soon as possible, and we can do that the best with you guys' help. So please go fill out that survey, www.smash.menu. You can follow me on Twitter at Pier7D. I will always be continuing this discussion. I tweet out about it a lot, and I had an honor speaking with all of you gentlemen. Very well spoken, very educated opinions, and you gave me a lot of insight too. I learned a lot here, so thank you very much for having me, and I'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Pierce.
Thank you.
Who's next? Who wants to sign out?
I'll sign out. I'm kind of getting a little tired. I got school in the morning. Just gonna say, it was a lot of fun talking, a lot of fun doing this. It's also kind of cool being able to interact with the chat and have this big interactive conversation. Never done anything like it before, so it's actually kind of a blast. So, yeah, guys, I'll chat with you later. And
drop your Twitter.
Drop my Twitter. I'll drop my Twitter in the chat.
All right, we'll post it later.
Ta-ta for
now. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for including me on the conversation as well. I actually had a lot of fun talking about all of this. We garnered a lot of really useful information from different players, from a lot of the high-profile people as well. So thank you for including me on this. I'm going to go ahead and drop off. This is Infinity, part of Tourney Locator. Please go out to Twitter and follow at Tourney Locator and follow at Infinity. So thanks, everybody. Y'all have a good night.
See you, Sean.
All right, I'm Bwett. You can follow me at the Bwett on Twitter, as well as that, the whole Tourney Locator pizzazz at Tourney Locator. Check out our YouTube. This will be on YouTube tomorrow. Yeah, it should be on YouTube tomorrow. So for all of y'all can just freaking spam it out to people and whoever you want to watch it. I'm sure all of y'all will like it.
Tafokints?
Hey, shout-outs to everybody. Thanks for organizing. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for initiating. Follow me at Tafokints. I write a lot of great articles on Melee on me. And shout-outs to my Giants for winning the World Series. Good stuff to Madison Bumgarner. I'm going to go celebrate.
All right, cool. Thanks for joining us. And I am Richard Terrell. I am at KirbyKid, and the official Twitter for Project Smash is at Serving Smash, because we're here to serve the Smash community and really make it a better place. Thanks for tuning in tonight. There'll be many more of these in the future. Do fill out the survey. Your voices are important, and we will see you next time.